To a couple different people here in a little bit. We've got some guests here. But first, I want you to tell me what made you start this?
So Halt the Hate was founded purely on my own personal experiences and my family's. Before I got married, onto my first 3 years of marriage and my son's first 2 years of life, I experienced bullying. I was a professional model for many years, kid model all the way into my early adult years. And I was in pageantry, and I never experienced anything like this until real adulthood life started for me. And there was a point where, there was no help, there was no outlet, and I was embarrassed, and I didn't know how to cope, and I didn't know what to do. I mean, felt like if I spoke about my problems with someone else, that I would be judged.
Yeah.
And it's our ego as adults, and we develop that as we get older. Children don't have ego. When we get adults, we want to always remain strong in the public eye, and or even just in front of our friends. So I said, Halt the Hate is going to be something great. And so all the negatives, all that horrible energy, I turned it into positives, and I created Halt the Hate to have support for us
That's
adults.
absolutely amazing. Amazing. Congratulations
Thank
on
you.
that. I mean, because not everybody can, put themselves out there. I mean,
Right.
because, I know you have many stories. You shared a few of them with
Yeah.
me before we started filming, but it's a lot. It takes a lot on men,
Right.
women, adults, and,
Right.
as children, we kind of tend to laugh it off a little bit, and we just
Correct.
we keep that in us, I think,
Correct, yeah.
but being an adult is a different, because it does affect your family. It affects your, your children,
Right.
your extended family, because you turn into a different person, I would imagine.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it completely affects your mental health. Mine was suffering. And there was to the point where I'm like, this is supposed to be the happiest time in my life, which it was, but it was shadowed by harassment and bullying. And it was nonstop. And to take care of my mental health, this was my therapy. Let me create something great. Let me create something big that's going to not just help me, but it's going to help other people. Even if it's just one person, I need to
Absolutely.
be able to help them, because this is something that no one should go through alone.
No, it's not. And I know it's difficult for people to speak about it. So I'm glad you are here to talk about it, and to have ears for that as well. We have two District 9 candidates in the House today. We've got Celeste Tidwell and Emily Joy Garza. And I am so excited for y'all. And here it is. Y'all are in it. It's the last leg of the election. I mean, right? I'm sure, Emily, you're exhausted. Celeste, exhausted. Yes. All right. So, being in the public eye, we all know it's difficult. It's a very difficult plane to be on. But y'all chosen, a political side to it. And do you feel that, I know that, again, we've talked off camera, but Celeste, tell me, for you, it's been a long road. It's been a hard road. But bullying tends to happen whether you're in politics or not.
That's right.
But because you're in this situation, do you feel like it's become something bigger?
Yes. So I think my first experience with real life adult bullying probably happened now. So many things that happened. It turned into just a lot of bullying online first, and that was upsetting. And then it turned into where my signs were being destroyed and damaged. And I think I realized, was trying to intimidate me, to shrink me, to scare me. And then I realized, gosh, I'm being bullied. This is crazy. I'm an adult and I'm being adult bullied. And that's where I started realizing it, and kind of reached out. And it's hard in a case like that, because you don't feel like you have support. People kind of tend to brush it off. And I found this wonderful person sitting next to me that came to me, and we talked about things, and she just had made me feel so welcome to hear me out. And then she had known Alexandra, and it just, everything meshed together.
Well, see, and that's where Emily, I mean, that must make you feel like, I mean, you've got someone that stands next to you that you go through some of the same things as well.
Oh, yeah. I mean, politics brings out the best and the worst in people. So, I anticipated a little bit of adversity. I could never have imagined the specific things that we both have encountered. There's similar stuff. But it was anticipated to get some adversity, because I think also if you're doing everything wrong, then perhaps people won't care as much about you.
Right. Well, that's a good point. I mean, that's good that you can look at it that way.
Yeah. I tried, and it has been a journey. We're running through the finish line here, but we're still running. We finished early voting last night. We've got the general election day is Saturday, 7 to 7. And then we will find out who will be the next District 9 City Council,
That's right.
man or woman.
Man or woman. Right.
Yeah,
That's right.
so it's an exciting time and it's an
Right.
important election. But yeah, we're in it, and I think you have to stay positive and you
Sure.
have to keep your sense of
course.
humor, because if you don't, then it can
Yeah.
really affect your mental health.
Do you feel that female leaders are targeted more frequently though than being,
For sure.
I mean, lots more harassment and
Yeah, for sure. Because if you're too powerful, you're too much.
Mhm.
If you're not powerful, you're weak, right? So
Yes,
it's
yes.
hard to find that balance, and I don't believe that men probably face that same.
Adversity.
Yeah, no.
I do believe that, I think, because this is the third time I've run, and I've been in a public office before. And I believe in this particular case, I think it's getting worse for women. It should be getting better at the breaking the glass thing and all of these things that happen. I think it's already a man-dominated world. And I feel that with the bullying, the kind of bullying that I got, like some of the internet bullying that I got was very personal, facial, talking about my face and how, I can't frown, and how I'm just things that women would say that are jealousy things. And that's what my mom would have said. They're jealous. And you get tired of hearing that. I would tell my daughter,
Right.
a pageant girl, they're just jealous. And I know she got sick of hearing that, because there's more to it. It's not just jealousy. It's just evil and mean,
Right.
period, to a woman, I think, to hurt them and break them down. They just want to shrink you and break you down. And you've got to rise up and be stronger. And that's hard to do.
Yeah. And, with women, these days in the world that we're in, women tend to go against each other, and so,
Unfortunately.
y'all are sitting in the room together, running against each other,
Correct.
and y'all have found the support to be there for each other. So, have you ever had to intervene, seeing someone in the moment of it?
Oh, for sure. But I mean, I'm always been a girl's girl. I'm in the business of women. I own a cosmetic tattoo business. And I also, through my clients, encounter, I hear their stories about how they're facing adversity. And, it can be a very vulnerable conversation. They're usually with me for 2 to 3 hours, whether I'm doing their brows or their lips. And so, I'm also, I think, a little bit of a therapist.
You get to know them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I get to know my stylist. I mean, they know everything.
Yeah, for sure. And my background before moving to San Antonio, I was in Washington, D.C. And in D.C., a lot of people are overworked, overstressed, and there are a lot of powerhouse women in D.C. That face that same adversity, maybe more so than here in San Antonio, because they're working in the White House or they're working at the Capitol.
Right.
It's just, yeah, for sure. And I think that, I think most women know, but when you're in this situation firsthand, it's hard to give yourself that same advice.
Sure.
I could give somebody else advice all day. Well, yeah, just ignore them, or,
Easier
don't
said
take
than
it
done.
personal. They're just jealous.
Oh, yeah.
But then sometimes when you're the strong person, you don't have people reminding you of those
Right.
things that
think
you need
kind
to
of
be
have
reminded
that,
of.
though. You have that. I can think of many things, especially with my daughter being in the pageant world, specific things where you've had to defend people when they're being bullied. But I can think of even things being times that you felt like you have to intervene. And I do know one time, and it stands out to me probably the most, is there was a young lady at an HEB checkout. And I just remember the cashier was being really mean to her and really rude. And the woman just really was a language barrier. And I just sitting there watching, and her just being like, no, that's not it. And the woman was like shaking, trying to get coupons and all sorts of things. And I said, she doesn't speak English. You might want to call a supervisor. And I said, you know what? And I speak Spanish. I said, and I started talking to her in Spanish, and I tried to tell her, like, don't worry in Spanish, to make her, because that was just bullying. There's a language barrier here. There's an interference with y'all talking, but she was being so mean to her and making her feel so uncomfortable. So that has always stood out of my mind amongst many other occasions. But that particular one, it just so happened I could speak Spanish, but her job should have been to go get someone that could speak Spanish.
Right.
That's all she had to do. And then she wouldn't have had to really bully the poor person.
But you stepped up and you made her feel comfortable.
Absolutely. I think Emily would step up as well
that's-
anytime.
Well, that's what
Absolutely.
happens is, like, so people they see bullying, they see the action happen, and most of them say, well, I'm going to just stay out of it.
They
I'm gonna
turn their
keep the peace.
cheek.
I'm going to be neutral, but it's not being neutral. What you're doing is you're feeding the problems. They're bystanders.
For sure.
And so they're either canceling it or stepping up and speaking about it and saying, hey, you know what, maybe you should not do this. Or they're playing that part, I'm just going to stay out of it. No, because guess what? That problem is going to keep repeating itself. So I'm glad you stood up for
Absolutely.
that
Oh,
woman,
yeah,
because
absolutely.
I'm sure there was a lot of other people that just stood there and done nothing.
Yeah, and they-
Unfortunately, yeah. And
Yeah.
I do think that sometimes, again, when you're perceived as someone who may be a strong man or woman, they might think, oh, well, she's okay. She doesn't need, she doesn't need my help, or she doesn't need me to speak up.
Right.
But I think it's important that, we teach even our children. I try to teach my son at a young age, and he's so sweet. He now includes, the kid at the playground who doesn't have any friends, or who maybe isn't invited to play basketball,
or birthday party,
because I
or
think that
something,
you have to lead by example.
Yep.
Yeah, and so
and
on that,
start at a young
I want to ask you this:
age.
how do you work to create an environment where women support another, that obviously you're competing against? I mean, like, how do you what makes you in that mindset of,
Well, I think again, it's leading by example.
Yeah.
I see so many things in some of the Facebook forums. I don't know if you're seeing it. This is a nonpartisan race,
right?
but people are maybe in one party saying, "Oh gosh, did you see who took a picture with who, or
Yes.
who's in a video with who?"
Yes.
I try to be pleasant with
Everybody.
because we don't know who's going to end up in office. We're going to get a new mayor soon. We're going to get basically all new blood
All
for
new.
city
All
council.
new.
And I think it's important not to burn bridges,
absolutely.
right?
peace.
So,
and sometimes if you do defend somebody, like there's an injustice going on social media, oh my, you get just crucified for it,
Yep.
and for being the good guy, and to try to like make it, I guess as far as it's hard because with children is one way, with with adults, I didn't even know adult bullying was this bad, what's happening to me, and I couldn't even believe it happened. But I think with children, sometimes I think keeping the peace is best,
Right.
and that's not best.
It's not necessarily that's kind of
no.
almost you're just skirting it away.
Yeah.
yeah,
Correct.
And
for
that's
sure.
where I think we get caught up with, you end up feeling down on yourself because you have so
Right.
much
Yeah.
emotion tied up inside that it's like, where do you go? What do you do?
Sure. And I think when you're, elected to be a city council man or woman, you have to be able to negotiate policies. It's not just about what you want.
Absolutely.
You can have
Right.
the best idea,
Sure,
right? But you
sure.
got to get everybody else on board if you're going to, pass those policies.
Yes.
So again, I think it's really important to remain neutral, remain friendly with
Right.
everyone, so that way you can
Yes,
be an
yes.
effective leader.
Right.
But yeah, when
and there's no room for me, I don't see the room for physical like why do
Right.
you have to go physical on anyone?
I
Where's
agree.
a council member that has dreadlocks right now, and it's pink dreadlocks, Jalen?
Oh, yeah.
Everyone loves Jalen, but why do you have to even go there? How does that make you not a good person?
Right.
If you get some type of fixtures at your age, if you get your hair dyed, why does that make you a person to target?
Right.
Why?
What does it do
That
for
doesn't-
them? Why
Yeah.
are they?
And I feel like it's in their insecurities.
Right.
Sure.
They're the ones that are having the issues. It's not, but they try to flip it and to put it on.
Yeah.
Yeah,
someone else.
actually the very first advice I was given by a political advisor. This was before I decided to, for sure, run. I was still thinking about it. He said, "Well, before you file, you better make sure you dye your hair.
Oh,
You're
yes,
not
that's the big one.
you dye your
Yes.
no, you're
Wow.
you're not the typical District 9 look. You need to tone it down." And I thought to myself, for a second, I considered it.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I know. But then I said, you know what? I wouldn't feel like myself. I wouldn't be able to go on the campaign trail and feel confident.
Be who
So,
you are.
it's sort of,
This is who I am.
this is
Right.
authenticity at the truest core, and sort of
Yes.
take it or leave it. I think there's too many
Yes.
politicians that maybe have the script and the
Mold.
mold of the box of what you're
Yeah.
supposed to look like. And I think it's time to break that mold and just be real. Just be a real human. I think we have
That's what
too
I
many
love.
politics
yeah.
and
Yeah.
too many politics in politics.
Yes,
I love
we need
it.
more real
It's true.
people.
It's true.
I
They
love
did
it.
that with me. I'm 57, and I've had my hair with purple in it for a long time, like 5 years, and I think that was one of the things that someone said, and I always said, it's my favorite color.
That's
my
yeah,
answer.
why not?
That's
It's
you.
my favorite color, and and I don't want to be, and there's nothing wrong with people being in that atmosphere and wearing a pantsuit or whatever. I personally like bling and fur, and I like to wear a ring on every every finger, and I like my nails long, and that doesn't make me less of a candidate
No, it
or less
doesn't.
viable just because that's the way
Right.
I put my picture by putting my picture on my billboards. I went to photographer and
Do you want to show that?
yeah, I have no problem showing it.
This is very difficult to see. It's not I just can't believe this is happening to.
So this was cut from one of my 4x8 signs, and it was brought to my home, and it's cutting out my mouth, and it's got also where it's cutting a forehead, like an X target. And I've had to deal with this. 8 signs have been done like this, and 4 have been stolen. And I only bought 25 signs. So this is what my kids have had to see. My grandchildren had to see. Grandma, your mouth is cut out on your sign. So it's spilled into my children and family and friends, and seeing this, calling me constantly. And
That's
I just
hurtful.
was the person that self-funded, and I'm not buying 100 signs.
Right.
And
You know?
right.
those 4x8s are like
They're
$30 each.
Yeah.
Expensive,
Not
yeah.
even
So,
installation included.
Yeah.
Yes.
So and that doesn't include installation. So it's not only is it
It's an
hurtful, it's
investment, yeah.
expensive.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes.
Well, I'm sorry you're having to see that, and we're almost through with this. Y'all are going to be ending,
Yes.
here the next few days. So, is there anything that you want to tell our viewers out here about, any policies that you're willing to, talk about, or anything that you're wanting to do?
So
I would say, but the thing that comes to mind as far as policy, I think, to intertwine both things with bullying, I think when the officers come over, you take things very seriously, and a lot of platforms on our district are public safety, a lot of response timing. And in my case last night, they really didn't believe me, or they really didn't believe. I had actually last night a perpetrator come to my yard, and my girls were there, and the officer actually told me that it could be a possum, and it wasn't a possum, that my fence was bent and things like that, because our district is on to public safety. That's one of the things that everyone has a problem with. That kind of bothered me. And I think that he also mentioned that it could be children, but to blame children on something like that is also deterring the fact that it's an actual adult doing this.
Right.
This isn't a child doing this. There's no way. They're not bringing a sign to my house. So I think as far as policy goes, for me and a lot of candidates, one of the bigger ones is public safety, because it's not so much the officer as much as the fact that we need a little bit faster response time, and to be taken a little seriously. I have 4 police reports on this, and I've got nothing done. And then once it gets into your home, that close to home, that's scary.
That's very
Yeah.
sad.
That's
Yeah.
scary.
Well, it was refreshing to hear you say mental health, because I don't think that is a priority plan for most candidates. Yeah, it's usually we're going to fix your streets,
That's right.
we're going to make the neighborhood safe, the typical stuff. So I'd say what is unique on my policy platform, I do have mental health. And so under mental health, it falls under an umbrella called protecting our vulnerable. So
Very
that
good.
encompasses our seniors. My grandfather's 97. He lives in Stone Oak, and he's still rocking and rolling. But since he moved here, I've encountered how he is so disconnected to what's going on. It's hard for him to find transportation now that he can't
Wow.
drive. And believe
Yep.
it or not, he was driving until 96. So
Wow. Wow.
they don't cut you off until you hit a curb or a person,
Okay, well,
unfortunately. So
yeah.
I guess that also falls under safety. But he it's important that he stays social, because I think if you don't use it, you lose it.
Right.
Right.
So making sure that there's an advocate for our seniors is important. With public safety, I don't think our officers have enough mental health
Okay,
support.
there you
I
go.
don't
Yeah.
think so.
There you
So
go.
it's not just constituents.
Yeah.
I think our officers really need more mental health support,
Yeah.
and just having it be talked about.
Yep.
more. I
Well, and
think
it
it's
is
really important.
May is Mental Awareness Month,
It is.
so
Wow.
so
Awesome.
we're
Amazing.
getting ready to
Yeah.
go into that.
Yeah,
So
yeah, we know we're gonna need a
Yeah.
mental health break.
Oh yeah,
May.
and there's so much. And I think again, I think we need it just like with the children when they come home and tell you. I think you let them know. You hear them. You don't shun it away. It doesn't mean you're keeping the peace by not speaking. And you need to say to me and bullying in general, but I think you need to make sure that they understand that we don't want to be the people that you're against that are doing that to you. We don't want to be that person.
Right.
Right.
But you want to recognize it, and it's okay to recognize it, and it's okay to speak about it, because
Mhm.
you're right. Mental health will get you.
Yep.
If you don't speak about it, you're going to go to bed at night thinking, God, I wish I could have told
And-
somebody. I
yep.
wish I could have
Yeah,
told somebody."
I think the more you talk about it, the less of
Mhm.
a secret it needs to be, you know?
Right.
And I think it's important to have a leader in office that is able to bridge that gap, and someone who's strong on social media, that's okay, you know, doing videos on social, and talking about it, because right now at the polls, I don't know about you, but I mean, there are hardly any youth showing up. And I think one way to reach youth best would be through social channels. You
That's
know?
great. That's a great idea.
Making
Yeah.
sure,
That is the way.
yeah, just putting it on the agenda to talk about, you know, a few times a month, whether it's through social or whether, you know, it's
Yeah.
an interview like this,
Sure.
and having someone on office staff specifically for mental health, bullying, non-emergency situations,
right.
which unfortunately can become emergencies.
Absolutely.
you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Which I think, and I hate it because like Emily, like it's her first time running, but the experience that she has as a business is big, and there are a lot of candidates that have a very tremendous, beautiful business background. People like myself as well. I don't have that, but I feel that that's what City Council really needed is when she just mentioned that type of program. We can't do those things unless we're in that seat.
Sure.
We can't even do anything unless we're there. So when these people have businesses, that's great, but that doesn't mean that that's going to make you the person that's there. But people have been fooled by that because that's such a big backing, and people seem to think that is what's going to make them. You know, they've done all of these things, but you can be someone that owns like Holistic, her business, and my gosh, she's done wonderful things. Just to do what she's done with me has been, I don't know what I would have done if I didn't have a candidate. It's amazing to have a candidate on your side.
Yeah.
And even though we're running against each other, to be able to say, Emily, you know what just happened today? That,
Yeah.
and we don't even talk about politics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're talking about what's happened to me today and what's
Yeah.
happened to her. And that to me is big.
Yeah.
It's big.
And I'll tell you, I mean, even though we have faced adversity within District 9 compared to some of the other districts, we're pretty mild. There's some
Vicious.
yeah, there's some vicious stuff going on. So I think it's important to, you know, right away, I tried to introduce myself. Look, you know, I'm not here to mudsling. In
Right.
fact, I was specifically
This is bad. Yes, you should say this. Yes.
I was asked to mudsling another candidate very early on before I had filed.
Wow.
And I said I wasn't willing to do that. And because I wasn't willing to do that, I then faced adversity.
Wow.
Which still some of the stuff that's going on is because I wasn't willing to do that. So
Yeah, she chose to do the better.
I'm
thing.
not going to come straight out the gates. Like
No.
I don't think that's the best strategy. I don't think it's a good look. I'd rather take the high road and stay classy. You know, because we do see other candidates very openly filing ethics complaints, you know, doing all sorts of things. And I just don't think it's a good look. It's not my style. So
you do go on social media and see some things and you're like, wow, please don't make a doll
Even
of
in the
me.
press.
Please don't make
Yeah.
a doll. Like, you know, please don't do that. And, you know, and it's scary and it's, you do want to be, and most people do, I know, like Emily, and I know that people say, that's the first thing, was someone that hates you. I'm like, well, I'm sure there is someone that hates me. I
Right.
mean, of course, but I can't think that anybody, I mean, I can't help you in this investigation telling you who did this, because I'm sure I don't know who it is, but I do know I'm being targeted, and I do know that it's scary and it's real, and I can't just brush it away because my arm wasn't shot, or
Right. No, it's
this
yeah.
is real and
Right.
it's hurtful. And
Yeah.
There's
and
not
it's
physical
ugly.
blood.
Yes.
Okay, Alexandra, I know you had a couple of questions that you wanted to ask our candidates here.
Yeah. So let's get personal. So
Sure.
I have a little boy. His name is Luca. He's 2. I have not experienced the bullying yet. You know, I need this answered for me too. And I'm sure there's gonna be a lot of moms, a lot of parents that need to know, what do they do? I mean, they have young kids, they don't know how to handle it. What happens when your child is getting bullied at school? How do you approach it? Do you go and talk to the parents after, of course, talking to the school? Do you
Right.
contact the parents? Do you not? And then, you know, there's also the other side of it is, why do children bully? They bully because it's somewhere okay.
Picking it up.
It's accepted somewhere in their household. So that's how it's a revolving cycle. So yeah, how do you guys handle that with your children? Have you experienced it?
You know, yeah, I have. You know, I have 7 grandchildren now, and my 4 children. But you know, they went to private school. They all went to Catholic school, and it happens there too. It happens there too,
Yeah,
not just in
of
public school. And I do recall many times the different types of bullying, but I know specifically the way I handled a certain thing. My daughter was in theater and she won the part of Belle for the Beauty and the Beast role. And she won it by all her merit, and she's a vocalist. And I remember they were so angry, the girls were so angry that she won this part, that they actually started signing a petition to remove her from the part. And they were already in practices and play practices, and she was crying every day and upset every day. And I remember going up to the theater teacher and addressing it, but they were doing it behind her back. And that's what hurts the most, is when they weren't seeing it happen. So we did go to the principal and explain to them, she was chosen. She had to talk with all the kids, and it did make it worse. It made it worse because then, Portland's her name, it turned it into, well, she's whining now about us actually doing the wrong thing. You're doing the wrong thing, but she's whining about it. So they ended up taking the action of it. If it was said again or heard again, they were just going to cancel the whole show. And in a private school setting, they can do that. In a public school setting, it's a little different because they have to abide by certain rules. And in the private school, they can. If they want to cancel that show, they're going to cancel it because they have the right to do that. But I did go up there, and I just started going to every rehearsal and just sitting there, like I said, support. So I sat there at every rehearsal and just for the rest of my afternoons.
Did you ever feel like you needed to speak to the parents?
Absolutely. Oh,
did you?
absolutely.
And if you did,
yes,
how did you handle that?
I did speak to one of the parents, and one of them were the ones who were really upset that didn't get the role. And I said, I really went up to it saying, everyone's in this show, but there's an important part for everyone in this show, whether you're behind the scenes, your cameraman, everyone has a certain part. So in Portland's case, at Portland, and I would tell them why she got the role first. I said, but this was all judged. This was all fair judging. There were 3 judges. Does anyone remember that happening? And I asked them to point out, does your child remember there being 3 judges there? And then they would look at me and kind of like, okay, yes. I said, well, the 3 judges voted on her having this role. So this isn't her fault that she got the role. She went on her merit. And it didn't backfire me. In the past, yes, you're right. It does backfire. And they kind of stick up for their child. And first, they'll always say, my child doesn't do that. And that's the biggest thing. They will always say that. Yeah. My child doesn't do that. But it happens, and you have to remind parents sometimes, let's look back and see, let's look and kind of check with your child and ask. And I think bringing the child into it and saying, you're not in trouble, but we need to know, did you do this?
Right.
You have to start at home. You do.
Right. Emily, I know you have a small child.
Yeah, well, I think it's important that at a very young age that you teach children that kindness is not a weakness, it's a strength. In fact, my son in his room, he has like a little crocheted thing that says, being kind is cool.
Yeah.
Right.
Aww. Yeah.
And this year, my son entered 4th grade, and he's my only, so she's got a little bit more wisdom. And we're beyond the just food. Like it too. It's like, okay, do you need to go to the bathroom? Do you need to eat, or do you need to sleep?
Right.
You want to try to sit on the potty today?
Now we're entering these much deeper life lessons, and I'm like, where's the parent manual for some of these things? Because you just have to do your best. So my son, on his first day of 4th grade, for the very first time, encountered bullying. And when he came home, so first of all, he bought his own pair of brand new white tennis shoes. Okay. He was so proud for the first day of school. And somebody went out of the way at lunch to stomp their muddy shoes on his tennis shoes. And then that same kid later in the day took one of those metal rulers.
Oh gosh.
And was like, so he came home with physical injuries on his back.
I'm sure you wanted to march right
well,
up there.
That was
not
my
ready for
first
this.
instinct, but then I was like, okay, let's bring it back in, because again, kindness is cool. How do I handle this?
Yeah.
But if you are a parent, it's hard. You want to go and I mean, God forbid, fight a 4th grader.
Baby
That's not going to resolve anything. So I think number 1, you have to stay calm, right? Take a deep breath. With schools, depending on where you're located, different schools, whether it's public or private, or whether you're in Texas or DC or Michigan or wherever, the school policies, you unfortunately take a deep breath, read through the policies, because there usually are protocols for what you should do. And also, with it being the first day of school, I didn't want to raise AG double hockey sticks.
That's a tough,
because
spot.
I'm like, I'm just getting to know this teacher. Right. So I just, I reached out to the teacher. I said, hey, I don't know if you're aware of this, versus me going above her. Right.
Keep it,
because I don't know this story. I don't know her side of the story. I don't know if she is aware. What I was hoping was that she didn't ignore it. Right. And she was not aware. Right.
Okay.
So it was my first instinct was like, I'm going to march down to the principal, da, 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 da.
Right.
But then I said, you know what? That might not be the best look.
Yeah.
I need her on my side.
Right.
Right.
Because then you get the X on you.
So
For,
I need to give
yeah.
her the benefit of the doubt.
Right.
She's got what, 20, 30 kids in her classroom.
Right.
I'm sure she wasn't aware, and she wasn't. And she said, thank you so much for coming to me first.
Awesome.
And she squashed it right away. But also what I try to teach my son is that kids don't do that who are happy on the inside, right?
Mhm.
It is a projection of their own sadness in their own heart. It's not necessarily, it's not a you problem. It's a them problem.
Correct.
So, you know, I try to teach my son, you know, it's not anything you did.
Yeah.
Don't take that personally. You know, maybe he's not getting the love he needs at home, or maybe
Right.
he feels excluded. So, you know, maybe, you know, if you include him in a couple things, and so now they're like, you know, buds.
Right.
Oh,
So,
wow.
Right.
Yeah. So
That's
I
awesome.
think you
Okay.
really have to teach kids and adults that
Yeah.
being kind isn't weak.
Right. Right.
It
right,
is a
right.
strength. And I think it's easy.
not
I think
being
it's
quiet
easier
about
to get
it too, because sometimes they do that backfires too, and they don't want to start trouble or start anything. And I think that's why a lot of bullies get away with what they get away with, because you are quiet, and they just want you to be quiet and don't say anything.
Right.
And I think with the with the sign thing, I think because I started saying something, I got it more. And I probably maybe think now, okay, if I would have just let one sign happen, is my lips cut out? I don't know. And the lips aren't even there, because I asked the guy that fixed my sign, like, where are the lips?
Can we put
And he's
them
like,
back
their
on?
lips, because the lips aren't on the ground. Where are the lips?
Maybe they wanted them, because your
Did they
lips are
take them?
fabulous.
What happened? So and by talking about it, they did more. So
Right.
it's like I got them rustled up, and it's kind of a twisted edged sword, you know, like a double-edged sword. Like, what do you do? But I think I didn't feel ignoring it was the case. I think you have to say it,
Right.
because then that does teach children, like, okay, I just got slapped across the face in the restroom.
Right.
I'm not going to say anything. I don't want to cause trouble, you know. And no, but you have to.
Yeah.
You got to let them know. Please speak to me. Please
Yeah.
speak to me. I'm not going to embarrass you. I'm not going to go up there and scare you or tell anyone. But if they don't tell you, they're going to keep it somewhere, and it's usually
Right.
inside their head, and that's going to be grow, and it's
Yeah.
not good.
You know what I found crazy is, you know, like I mentioned earlier, I didn't experience bullying until my adulthood.
Wow.
And,
Wow.
you know, what I learned is a term, it's called bullying by groups, bullying by association. And, you know, often it's the bully, and then it's their little, I call it the little army.
Yep.
And they're in the circle of bullying because maybe they don't know who the victim is, but they're
Right.
listening to the bully, and they just want to do what's the cool thing, or however it benefits them in their brain to agree with, you know, the bully's motive. And so that's how
Right.
bullying by groups start. And that's how, you know, the bullying always happens in groups. Usually
Sure.
it's not just
not
one
just one.
person. It's,
Yeah.
it's
It's an army.
the army,
Right.
correct. Because they can't face it on their own, that person on their own. So they help, and they get, you know, other
They
people around them.
Yes.
Correct.
They recruit.
There you
And
go.
so, you know, of course you see that in school, but as an adult,
Yeah.
it's so much more dangerous, and it's so much more sophisticated on how they attack. You know, we're adults,
Sure,
we
I see
bully.
what you're saying.
You know, you want to bully?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
guess what? Adults have way
They have
more
a-
sophisticated tactics, way more outlets to do than children.
Sure. I never even thought about that. That's
Yeah.
true.
It's
And
true.
I mean, bullying, you know, it can affect our marriages. It can affect our, you know, children's lives, our relationships with our children, our jobs, and even just, you know, our reputations.
It's true.
So
It's
damaging.
true.
And so the more people you have in that bullying circle, the harder it hits you.
Yes.
You know, and it's just, and then it starts, you know, starts growing, and it doesn't end at school. So it's, you know, for me, I'm like, how am I going to handle this when I have a kid? Of course I can handle it on my own now. I have my ways of healing and getting better, but how do you tell your child, like, okay, sometimes it's going to be in a group. Sometimes, how do
Yeah.
you know,
And it's going to be in a group, and it's also going to be again, like Emily said as well, it's something within them that they feel they have to do
Correct.
that.
Mhm.
So, you know, I think the most important thing is say, first of all, you did nothing wrong. You
Mhm.
did nothing wrong. There's got to be something that's wrong with them at home.
Yeah.
Something
Right.
that made them unhappy.
Right.
And you'll find, if you dig deeper, you'll see this in movies all the time. You see this on data, on documentaries. You'll see where something's happening at home.
Yeah.
Something very severe is
very
happening at home, and they just choose sometimes the weakest one. So I feel like the way to handle a child is make them the strongest one.
Right.
So, you know, make them the
Mhm.
strongest one. You go in there with your head held high. Be. I would say, I hate to say this, but I mean, be the different one. Like, you know, if you like, be the different one, like I did with me, and not have okay, you're 57 and your hair is got purple in it. Like, no, I'm okay
Be
to be the
yourself.
different one and do that and keep them going and don't give up, because that'll happen in pageantry, that'll happen in
Correct.
elections, where people will say, gosh, I'm never running for office now. I don't ever want to have my signs look like that. And then it deters people from doing the things in life that they should do. Or we have a valued person that could be a good candidate or a good public person that we need in office, and then it'll deter them. And we don't want that deterrent.
Right.
No, I mean, there's so many qualified individuals out in the world that are considering running for office, whether it's at local level, state level, wherever. And I think that it's important to know that this is a conversation that hopefully doesn't scare you further, right? It's important that you run for something,
Absolutely.
right? There's too many people
Absolutely.
talking themselves out of it because they're worried about failing or they're worried about being bullied. And I've always tried to empower myself and my son to be authentic, whether you like it or not, because I
Right.
think it's so important
Right.
because, yeah, there's too many people that, especially in politics,
Oh, yeah.
that feel like they're supposed to fit into a certain box
Right.
to please everybody. But even if you do that, not everybody's going to dig you, or,
No,
you're not going to be
and
everybody's
you're
cup
not.
of tea.
And we have a young man that's a senior in high school running in
Yes.
our race, and
Tristan.
I just want to hug him all the time, because what
Wow.
man, what courage. And I know people think in his school, oh God, what a nerd, what is this, because that's how they are. But this gentleman is so sweet and smart, and he's going somewhere. I
He's
can
gonna
see
be president one day. Just
Oh
watch.
my
Yeah.
God!
There you go.
Yeah,
So,
and he's
yeah.
just dressed up to the
Amazing.
nines
Yeah.
all the time.
Good for
and-
him.
Yeah, he's always the
Yes.
best dressed for
Always
sure.
the best dressed, like he is the
Um,
best dressed.
And I'll
yes.
tell you, it's scary whether you're in your 40s, 50s, or 60s,
Sure.
right? And so this, again, is my first time running for office. I've never done anything political before. And I'll tell you, the entire time, I just did it scared.
Well, look
Right.
at you.
Right.
You just got to do it scared, and
Yeah.
that's how you learn.
Yeah.
Right.
And she actually is the strongest one now.
Oh,
really?
well,
I mean, really.
I
I
don't
mean,
know
she's
about
out
that.
there like
Thank you.
right neck and neck with the ones that are, I mean,
I
they're
love them.
considered, front runners. And I've always hated that, because nothing should make, we're all front runners. 'Cause
Right.
Just for running, we're front runners.
Absolutely.
Just for doing it and having the courage to put yourself
Yeah.
out there, we're front runners. And I think that has always upset me, that they would choose certain people that they can't determine the person's vote ahead of time.
Right.
They just can't.
Right.
So to her, she goes right by the supposedly front runners and stands right there.
And I'll
stands
tell
right
you,
there.
I've been raw and authentic, unscripted, and I think people resonate with that.
Good.
And so
Yeah.
I'm glad I didn't take that
Yes.
advice to fit into a little box,
Yes.
What I love about you
Um,
guys is that, you are both so different and so inspiring.
Yes.
Oh, thank
And
you.
intelligent and beautiful women.
Thank
And having you guys
Empower each
sitting
other.
down next to each other and support. And then y'all knew each other before I was on the phone with you individually. Y'all both spoke about each other so highly.
Nice.
And I said, wow, this is the true definition of women supporting
Real
women.
recognizes real.
It
I
really
mean,
is.
yes.
And I think that's
And-
why we, felt connected
Yes.
and aligned
Yes.
before we met too. And I don't even
Yes.
know how I
Yeah.
met you online,
Yeah.
but when I hugged you for the
Yes.
first time, I feel like we're old friends. And I
Right.
think there's something to be said, again, it's the darkness that's going to try to squash out
Sure.
the light.
Always.
Right?
Mhm.
That's right.
Shine bright, keep shining. Don't let them succeed.
Dim.
That's what they
Don't let
want
them
you to
dim
do,
you.
is to dim your light.
There you
So
go.
Don't-
keep
and
shining,
don't
be
dim
a
it.
beacon of hope for others. And teach your children to be kind at a very
Yes.
young age, because then they
Yes,
won't
yes.
become
Because
bullies.
we
There
don't
you
want
go.
them to be the person that we're against. We don't want them to be that person. We're trying to prevent them from becoming that person. So we want
Right.
to. We don't want to fight back like that.
Right.
And like I said, people will tell you, oh, they're jealous. And I mean, obviously there's an issue. And my husband will always say, it's, if I was a man and I saw your picture, I mean, maybe it's just, I said, well, I'd rather take being beautiful than not, I guess that's a plus.
Yeah.
I said, so I'm glad. And I think it made me think like, maybe I should put my picture up there, but I never will not now. I'm not going to do it now. I'm thinking now next time they're going to do that to my picture. Then I'm
Well,
just going to keep on putting my picture.
Yes,
up there.
you are. You're going to keep
Yeah.
going, whether
Yeah.
they like it or not.
Well, you guys, I shouldn't say guys, ladies, I'm so glad we've had this conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you
And
for
I
having
mean, is there anything else you want to say? Anything else why don't you remind everybody to go vote?
Yes. Please, our voting turnout in Bexar County, we were the 16th largest county in the nation, Bexar County. As you know, we're the 7th largest city in the nation, but the county is very high up there. and our voter turnout the first day was a little over 6,000 in the early voting, and we are not doing well at the polls. And I know everyone wants to go Fiesta, and let's go Fiesta, but you can take that 10 minutes and please go vote because it's your right, and we need to teach our children. It's we want someone in city council. It needs to be a revving up. We need a change. We need an Emily and Celeste in city council.
Yes, I completely agree.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, this municipal elections are so important. I don't think people realize that local city elections affect you more than presidential elections do, because we're going to control your safety. We're going to see, you know, our small businesses going to have support. Are we going to get these new stadiums and all these things that, you know, it's being talked about downtown? And water is such a precious resource right now. You know, making sure that you have someone in office that's going to advocate for you, advocate for what you want is so important. And we have a new mayor now. Mayor Ron's out. And there's 27 candidates. So I know it can be so overwhelming, but I do encourage you to research the candidates.
Correct.
Get out and vote. For sure. It's so important. And grab a neighbor, grab your family members, your coworkers, encourage them to go vote. And you can reach out to Celeste and I too, you know, send us a message on Instagram, Facebook, call, send me an email. We'll answer any questions you have.
I think the last thing I want to make sure that we remember to say, endorsements can be tricky, right? We said this before. These are opinions, and I've always wanted people to know this. These are opinions. When you get endorsed by an entity, there are like 5 or 6 people on that entity that have voting rights to vote for you, an endorsement. That doesn't mean that the entire community is endorsing you. So I think endorsements, do your own research, because people tend to lean on that, and then they forget about people. Just because you're not endorsed doesn't mean you're not viable, and doesn't mean you can do changes and make great changes and be a great person.
Sometimes the best candidates are the ones that aren't endorsed, because a lot of endorsements come with political agendas from committees, and that candidate essentially may be making promises to that committee before they're in office. So just because a candidate's not endorsed or they don't have a lot of funding behind their campaign, that does not mean you should exclude them from doing your research. Really figure out who you feel is going to represent you and your community and your family the best. And most candidates have their priority platform plans on their website. So do your due diligence. It's really important. We're getting new blood at City Hall, and hopefully we can make some meaningful change.
So everybody needs to.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Celeste. Thank you, Emily. Good luck to you both.
Good luck, you
and Alexandra, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for having your Halt the Hate. I just love that so much. So we're look, she brought us medals.
Yes, they're
Speaking of Fiesta,
So they're iconic to me. I'm very proud of them. They're beautiful.
Congratulations on that.
Yes.
All right. So thank you so much for watching, everyone. Thank you again, ladies and everybody. And you can see all of their. We're going to link Alexandra's. We're going to have a couple other things that are linked to this page. So go and check it out. So
thank you for having us in this important conversation.
Thank you guys. Y'all are fabulous.
Thank you. I appreciate y'all's
inspiring women.
Inspiring women for sure.
And good luck.
Yeah. All right. Y'all were watching the Talking with Trudy today. See y'all later.